It's no secret that Mario games tend to be pretty easy. That's really what got me hooked on this series. They're simple to understand, but also really fun to play. However, with all these games, there's a good challenge in some of them, and the most difficult moments are some of the most memorable. So let's go through all 20 mainline games and rank them from easiest to hardest. Here we go. 20, Bowser's Fury. It's kind of funny. On paper, this should be one of the most terrifying Mario games and look like one of the hardest. I mean, there's a giant furious Bowser who's going haywire all around the lake. In the moment when you first see this guy, it seems like you have no way to defend yourself. Then you realize just a little bit of light makes him run away, and the Giga Bell puts you on even ground again. The issue with this game is that it's not really a full one, just an addition to an already existing one. Therefore, it's quite short, and you can find all 100 cat shines of this place pretty easily on your first day of playing. And not to mention, you're probably not gonna die a lot because you can hold an abundance of power-ups, and Bowser Jr. can fight enemies for you if you want. And even if you do die, you just lose coins, so you can't game over. A good experience, but you probably won't think it's challenging. And there's something else that's not too challenging. Hitting that subscribe button and liking this video. Go ahead, confirm that for yourself and do it. 19, Super Mario Land. Another case of length being an issue here. All there is to deal with is 4 worlds, each with a few levels, and not too much difficulty in any of them. Except these stupid bugs that I hate. Honestly, the biggest thing that makes this game challenging is that the controls are definitely not as smooth as they are now. But that's not by design, it's just because the game itself is very old. It does make it a little more challenging, so I won't put it at the bottom, but outside of that, the levels and bosses are all kind of a cakewalk. 18, Super Mario Land 2. The same thing with this one, in the sense that it's pretty short. There's obviously 6 golden coins to collect, and to do so, we just beat a few levels in each zone. Again, all of these are pretty short and simple enough to get through for most players, especially if you can get a carrot and just fly over everything. This game might be a lot harder for me since I don't actually have a Game Boy. The only experience I've had is playing it on a keyboard, but I'm pretty sure if I had a proper controller for it, this would be the right spot on the list. 17, Super Mario Odyssey. I'm sure you know how much I love this game, and it really pains me to put it this low on any list, but I do have to be honest with myself. It's a pretty easy game, kind of by design. You're never required to complete any of the story in most of the kingdoms you travel to, so if you want, you can get all of the easiest moons and move on. That's not really a challenge when a lot of them are just kind of sitting there in broad daylight. And not to mention, the last level, Darker Side, is not nearly as hard as some of the other final challenges that we'll touch on later. Maybe I'm just saying all of this because of how many hours I've put into this game, although I've got to take some time to gush about it, so I'll say this. I love how this game is easy on its own, but there's so many challenges you can do to spice things up for yourself. So if you want it to be easy, it can be, but you can also make it much more difficult as well. 16, New Super Mario Bros. It seems like it would be a little tough to separate this series of games, but I'm putting this one down here because there really isn't a point that comes to mind that I struggled with. There's quite a few useful power-ups for you, and the levels are a bit on the short side, even as you get to the end of the game. Sure, there's a difficulty increase, but I've seen worse. The final boss is by far the simplest, and there's not even a bonus world after it, so the difficulty can't get brought up past the bottom of the list. 15, Super Mario Galaxy. This was my first 3D Mario, and I'm very thankful this is what I started with. The game does ease you into it very nicely at the start, and the super challenging stuff doesn't really exist too much. Because this game is planet-focused, it becomes more linear, and you're never really questioning what to do or where to go. And all of the bosses aren't really a threat, since they've got some pretty slow patterns going on. But basically, the hardest stuff comes towards the end with the purple comets. That's about as much as it's gonna get, because there's not even something to test your skills for the finale. It's mostly just relaxing. 14, Super Mario 3D Land. Kind of the same point I just made with levels being linear and pretty simple to get through. Most of these are also on the shorter side. If you're speedrunning the game, then you can pretty much fly through most of them. I did put this one a little higher though, because towards the end of the game, it does take an increase in difficulty, and I definitely remember having a hard time when I was a kid. Both finding medals to unlock stages and then actually beating them. Maybe that's changed for me nowadays, but still. 13, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Being the most recent game on the list, I haven't had as much experience with it, but what I do know is that it's a step up from the New Super Mario Bros. Games in some ways, but in others, not exactly. The 2D stuff has never really been super difficult, and most of the levels in this one fit that. What I find when I play is that most of the challenge comes from finding the secret seeds in the levels. There's been a lot of times where I'm playing through a stage and I cannot find the Wonder Flower, so I end up being short on the seeds to get to the next section of the game. Also, towards the end, there's a good chunk of levels that do take a step up in difficulty, as shown by the star ratings. However, I do think there's other games that can still do worse than the majority of this, especially when you can just pick up whatever badge you need to clear certain challenges. 12, New Super Mario Bros. Wii. In this case, you do have a choice between power-ups, but not as many as the badges. For this game, the main one to focus on would be the propeller mushroom, and it is pretty useful to get you through levels. Being able to fly up all the way above the screen is something that could have only been dreamed of in the older games, but at some point, it's gonna run out, and you've got to rely on platforming on the ground. There are some challenges in these, but like most of the other games, the levels are just kinda whatever, even with how epic that final fight is. If there's anything to note, however, it would definitely be World 9 with the hardest stages in the game. The work you have to go through to unlock all of them in the first place, and then actually beating them, is something I remember having a bit of a struggle with. 11, New Super Mario Bros. U. Okay, everyone kind of just sees these games as mostly copies of each other, so really everything I just said applies to this as well. All of these stages have basically the same exact difficulty up until beating the game. The only differences to point out is the fact that you have an acorn suit to glide through levels, providing not as much vertical distance, but a lot of horizontal distance, and the fact that the secret exits are a bit harder to find. That's why I decided to place this one above the last. I remember not being able to find some of these secrets to save my life. Also, the levels in World 9 provide even more of a challenge, especially if you're going for all the star coins. 10, Super Mario World. Gotta admit, I do love the controls in this one, and I'm very used to them. Opposite of the issue I talked about previously. It's that and the cape feather, which can be used to fly over everything, that makes this game easy at some points. But putting all that aside, I think it's safe to say this is more difficult than some of the new stuff. It felt like the platforming here was really focused on, and there's quite a few mechanics in this game to spice things up. So much so that tons of different Kaizo hacks were made using those very elements. Obviously, I'm not judging those, because the difficulty of this pales in comparison to that. But even in the original, it's still very secret-heavy with some worlds revolving around it. And there's another great final world to finish it with a challenge. 9, Super Mario Bros. 3. Now to the part where things take a jump up, kicking it old school with this one. I love this game for having many different themes and levels, and all of the platforming being very fun. One thing I did notice though is just how beginner-friendly it seems. Some of the enemies aren't as annoying as other games, and you can collect multiple power-ups to store and use whenever you want. It does help with getting past a tricky stage should you roll up on one. However, I do have to mention the last world, where they really do put your skills to the test. The huge gauntlet of airship levels, the hands that might grab you, and some final stages where you could definitely get a game over. It really does pick up towards the end. 8, Super Mario Bros. The first game ever. How did they do with the difficulty on it? I think most of what I just said applies to here, with them easing you into the game at the start. They want to make sure you know everything about the enemies and the power-ups, but it absolutely gets harder towards the end. 8-1 is a pretty long level with no checkpoint throughout. If you're not used to running through this last world like a speedrunner, it's probably going to be be a struggle. Then you have the most difficult enemy, possibly ever, the Hammer Bros. These guys are basically impossible to get past on a blind playthrough with no strategy. I just had to keep playing the game over and over again, just hoping to get lucky on passing 8-3. But when I didn't, it was super frustrating because here, you go all the way back to the start on a game over. Imagine if you had to deal with that in every game you play now. 7. Super Mario Bros. 2. The American sequel brought with it the most unusual game in the series, and I think because of the fact that it's so weird, it really spikes up the difficulty for me. All of the platforming here just feels way different, and it almost doesn't feel like certain hitboxes are programmed correctly. But of course, there's the game's main feature of picking up turnips and throwing them. With that also comes the digging mechanic, and I always hate whenever this shows up, because a path just forms where enemies could drop on you, and it's just frustrating. I'm not gonna put it any higher than 7 though, because at the very least, you can just pick between 4 different characters to help you with a certain challenge you might be on. 6. Super Mario 3D World. Interestingly, this is the other game where you can choose between those 4 characters. I did not do that on purpose, although I do think that helps you a little less on this one. I know that a lot of people look at this game and think it's one of the easiest ever, and for most of it, I'd kind of agree with that. You can basically run through most stages without stopping, and being able to climb walls with the Katsu is an advantage. But there are many more secrets to find in each stage, like 3 green stars and a stamp. You have to find a good number of them to beat the game, and finding every single one of them will most likely take a good while. Then, when you finally get them all and make your way to World Crown, you have to endure Champion's Road. As a kid, I thought this was the hardest level of all time. Seriously, it took me years before I was finally able to beat it, and this wasn't even the first time that I came across an insanely difficult final challenge. There was also 5. Super Mario Galaxy 2. Another one of my first video games ever, and similar to the first Galaxy game, it allows you to go in with not too much challenge to worry about. Even as a young 3rd grader, I was able to collect mostly every star in the game, but there's one major thing in this game the first one didn't have. Of course, I'm talking about the green stars that show up and give you even more of a challenge. It's definitely not as easy to tell where you're supposed to go or how to get them, and I remember not finding a good few of them for a long time, but when you do find them all, it's not over because you have to go through Grandmaster Galaxy. You cannot talk about hard Mario levels without bringing up the perfect run. 6 very difficult platforming sections with no checkpoints and no hits of damage to spare. I can't even begin to explain how long it took me to beat this stage. I still feel so much relief every time I'm able to get through it and 100% the game. 4. Super Mario 64. Before I say anything, I would like to make it clear that I did not grow up with this game, and I don't have the same nostalgia for it that other people do. But there is a lot of stuff here that is very difficult. Many of the stages are annoying and hard to get through, especially all of the 100 coin stars. There's also a lot of secrets in this game that I'm sure most everyone is aware of now thanks to the internet, but without that, it feels like there would be so many stars where I would have no idea what to do. And to top it all off, I've said it before, but I really don't like the controls here. Sometimes Mario walks in circles when trying to turn around, and sometimes I just can't get a side flip when I want to. Everything just feels so clunky and janky that it makes it a great challenge for me when I try to play. Again, this is coming from someone in Gen Z. Had I been in a different generation, I might feel differently, but that's why I gotta put it high on this list. 3. New Super Mario Bros. 2. You know, I would argue that there's a lot of levels here that don't have a lot of challenge. You could look at the game's theme and guess that right away, most likely. It's centered around giving you as much coins as possible. With that comes all the lives in the world, so you should never have a game over unless you're really bad. Why is this game all the way up here then? Well, I do think the difficulty spikes up in the last world a bit more than the other games. There's some bonus stuff to make things harder, and if you're up for it, there's the Impossible Pack. A run of 3 super hard stages that you have to beat all in a row. This is widely considered to be the hardest single Mario Mario level of all time. That reason alone is going to bring it up on this list a significant amount. 2. Super Mario Sunshine. What the heck even is this game? Look, I love it, but there is so much interesting stuff happening in this one. I'll say this, the controls are way better here than in 64, and FLUDD definitely helps with that. Using the hover nozzle to fix yourself in midair can be a lifesaver. But holy crap, man, some of these shines are hard. There's so many here that are notoriously difficult. The pachinko machine, with it shooting you off to the side for no reason. Collecting the red coins on a lily pad right over death water. Cleaning the eel's teeth beneath the surface, the list goes on. Also, I talked about how there were hard to find secrets before, but even with some simple shines in this game, there are so many where I had no idea what to do for the longest time. Remember that mystery level that takes place in Hotel Delfino, which has so many steps to it? Yeah, I really enjoy playing this game now, but anyone who tries it will be seeing a release of anger at some point. And number 1 is Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Did you expect anything else? The whole point of this game was to make it difficult and rage-inducing. The plan was, take the original Super Mario Bros. And turn it into a journey of hard platforming and trolls that would make anyone want to chuck their console out the window. There's a new power-up that kills you. There's warp pipes that send you backwards. There's paths that have to be taken in levels which are way too hidden. And once again, there's Hammer Bros in even worse setups. To be a bit charitable, what you're seeing right now is the All-Stars version. And the way this one works is you get a checkpoint every level you beat. So getting a game over isn't that big of a deal. But let's pretend like that wasn't the case. If it was like the original where you had to beat the whole game on one continue, I don't think I ever would have reached the end. This game would have destroyed me more than all of the others combined. Still think this series is too easy? Well, you know what? Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, so tell me what your experience was with these games, and which ones did you find the most challenging? For now, though, that's all I got. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone.